What is happening, guys? Today we are going to be reviewing Elden Ring DLC Shadow of the Erdtree from another video that came out just a few days ago and took the internet by storm by Feeble King. So Feeble King, I just found out about this guy the other day, but he created a video called FromSoft's Worst DLC Yet. Now this video has 216,000 views for this small channel. I mean, 31,000 subscribers, pretty small channel for a lot of views. And he says FromSoft's Worst DLC Yet. I'm gonna be reacting to this video and responding to this video basically, because if you have followed me for a while, you have known that I am a huge Elden Ring fan. I did a full Let's Play. I've done streams of it. I've done an easy guide walkthrough. I've done a get good guide. I've done small guides. I have over 120 hours in just the DLC alone. So I am very experienced in the Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree. And also, I did a review video myself where I said it was like a dream. Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree, like a dream. And I mean, I loved it. So today we're going to go and review his video. So shout out to Feeble King. We're going to review his review and really see if Elden Ring DLC was good or if it is truly bad.
Full of disappointment and mediocrity. In a games industry full of disappointment and mediocrity, From Software stands out as one of the last pillars of excellence. Like many others, I looked forward to Elden Ring's expansion more than any other new game release, because I knew that FromSoft couldn't let me down. And unfortunately, I was wrong. It gravely hurts me to admit this, but Shadow of the Erdtree is by far the worst Miyazaki-led Souls-like title to date.
What? No. This is in my opinion, the best DLC we've ever had. And I'll go into that, I'm sure, here. But this is not the worst Miyazaki has ever created. No. Have you played Dark Souls 1, 2? I mean, Dark Souls 1 DLC to compare to Dark Souls 2 DLC and Dark Souls 3 DLC was awesome. I love Dark Souls 3 DLC. That was really good. But this is not the worst DLC Miyazaki has ever created, or for that matter.
It takes every flaw present in Elden Ring's exploration and boss design and makes them several times worse. I'm certain that a lot of the negative discourse surrounding Elden Ring's expansion will be centered around the overly difficult bosses, and while I agree that the bosses are overtuned and not fun to learn, I also think the difficulty discussion is overshadowing the DLC's biggest flaw. Immediately when I started playing Shadow of the Erdtree, I could feel that something was not right, and I think a lot of people aren't admitting it, but they could feel it too.
No, this is not true. In my first playthrough, I loved it. I walked into the Shadow Realm and I was mesmerized by what I saw. Couldn't wait to explore it. And if you're saying too, oh, Shawn, you've only done one playthrough. No, I haven't. I've done, let's see here, 4 total playthroughs of this. I've done my Let's Play, a Get Good guide, streaming it, and another fun playthrough on the side, my walkthrough prep. I did a walkthrough prep as well. So I've played this DLC all the way through, killed every boss over 4 times now, and I still can say I love it. So that's definitely opinionated.
On my first playthrough of Elden Ring, I was immediately hooked. Yet now in the DLC, I could not contain my boredom.
What?
Much to my dismay, I realized that the worst part of the DLC is not the bosses, it's the exploration.
The exploration's the best part of any Souls game. The exploration's the best part, especially Elden Ring. It has an amazing open world. It's beautiful.
There are 2 types of rewards for exploration. Intrinsic rewards that are inherently enjoyable, like a beautiful view or a fun boss, and extrinsic rewards like increasing character stats. Shadow of the Erdtree has inconsistent intrinsic rewards and downright terrible extrinsic rewards. The majority of intrinsic rewards in Elden Ring's base game were underwhelming, and then a small amount were truly great. Typically after riding your horse past a ton of reskinned enemies for 6 to 8 minutes.
It usually took longer to find dungeons the further you were into the game. I should have said 3 to 8 minutes. Okay, so we got to cover the finding items that are not, worthy. I agree with that. I agree that there's too many cookbooks in the DLC, but I still enjoyed finding them and reading the lore. If you didn't know, you can look at all those cookbooks and craft the items, and you can read the lore of them, and you can learn more about the world. And if you're like me, you love the lore and you want to learn more about the world, that's a great reward, I think, to some degree. I do agree, though, that the cookbooks were a little underwhelming. but not to the degree he is, I think.
You might find a linear cave with mostly one enemy type and a reskinned boss at the end. Also, many of the extrinsic rewards you would find in these dungeons would be useless for any one build, such as a melee fighter finding spells. The glue that held this uneven experience together was the universal extrinsic reward of runes to increase player stats. Even if a cave was boring and had a reskinned boss, at least I leveled up. Like many players, I started the DLC around level 150, meaning that I had already hit almost all of the caps on my stats and I would get highly diminished returns for increasing my levels. Furthermore, I had max healing, a fully upgraded weapon, and tons of upgrade materials, so all of those rewards had also become useless. FromSoft understood the problem of useless rewards, so they added 2 new items, Scadu Tree Fragments, which I believe are supposed to be called Shadow Tree Fragments.
So that's correct. That is supposed to be Shadow Tree. So I like the Scattered Tree Fragments. I just wish that every time you started the DLC, it put them in brand new places. I think that would have been cool. I hate how I can go into the DLC, and since I have 4 playthroughs of this and I've done a walkthrough, I know exactly where all the Shadow Tree Fragments are. I literally can recall all of them in the game, all the way to level 20, because I built them into my memory now. So it takes away that fun aspect. So I wish this would take something from Remnant 2. They use a random generator in that game, if you didn't know, where every time you enter the world state, it resets everything. All the items, they're all different. And I wish the Shadow Tree Fragments had that element. So whenever you clicked new game on the DLC, bingo, the Shadow Tree Fragments were scattered in different complete places, so you had to explore everything again. I think that's the biggest concern I had with that.
And Revered Spirit Ash. Shadow Tree Fragments increase all player stats in the DLC world only, while Revered Spirit Ash increases the strength of summons and your horse.
And I liked those. I like the Shadow Tree Fragments. I think it's amazing how you can go into the DLC at level 200 or 700 and still be very difficultly challenged and have a great challenge in front of you until you upgrade those Shadow Tree Fragments. I love that. I think the Shadow Tree Fragments were fantastic.
Meaning that Revered Spirit Ash is largely useless for someone like me who doesn't use summons. So now,
I mean, you can use summons if you want. I choose to. Some of my playthroughs I use summons, and some of them I just chose to fight the bosses alone. You know, the summons are a good thing, I think.
instead of every
It can
enemy
make the game
and
fun.
tons of upgrade items being important rewards for exploration, there's only 1 or 2 items in the entire game that are important, and for some inexplicable reason, they are not the rewards for completing dungeons.
I like this. So one thing I refer back to Sekiro is I loved how I had to beat a boss to be able to get my character stronger. In the DLC, you can go ride around and get your Shadow Tree Fragments and upgrade your character and then destroy the bosses. I think you should have had to beat more bosses or these side dungeon bosses to be able to level up your character, kind of like in Sekiro. I think that would have been a good way.
You get these items by wandering around the open world and finding statues. As Video Game Donkey said, it's Paper Mario Sticker Star all over again. Outside of Shadow Realm blessings, a few new talismans, and if you decide to build switch to a new weapon, all extrinsic rewards in the DLC are worthless. Now,
No, that's not true. I mean, that's not true at all.
whenever I explore and see a purple item, I'm always thinking, please be the only important item in the game, and then I'm sorely disappointed when it's just another cookbook and
There are too many cookbooks. I agree, but it's still, I love to explore and find stuff. Even if they're useless items, I just enjoy that aspect of it.
wasted my time. While playing the DLC, the same important question kept coming to my mind. Why is a game with mostly useless rewards open world? The whole
Because open world games, you're supposed to explore. It's part of just immersing yourself into that world and having a good time.
point of the open world genre is exploring to find rewards.
Yes.
What point does the open world serve if I have no reason to explore the mediocre caves?
If our cats could talk, what would they say? We all wish we could hear our cats' voices.
Unfortunately, it gets worse, as the intrinsic rewards for exploration are also worse than in the base game. As I'll get into later, many of the remembrance bosses feel less like rewards and more like punishments, and the mini-boss quality
It's a Souls game. Duh. The bosses are gonna feel like punishment till you learn them. It's a Souls game.
Is terrible. Most cave or catacombs bosses are just buffed up normal enemies that don't pose much challenge, and when it's something else, it's usually an NPC or a reskin Death Knight. The base game also had
Hey, now I like the Death Knights. I think the Death Knights were freaking sweet. I liked fighting those dudes.
normal enemies as dungeon bosses, but that worked better since you were a low-level character fighting an endgame mob, as opposed to a high-level character fighting a normal enemy. They also added forges as a new mini-dungeon environment,
And I like the forges. I just wish forges had bosses. I think they needed bosses. I don't know why they didn't.
which I do think looks cool. However, the big twist with the Forge dungeons is that they don't even have a boss at the end. Similar to the base game, the mini dungeons are also lacking in enemy variety. Another reward for exploration are the mausoleums, which are always NPC invader duel fights instead of actual bosses. When Miyazaki
I liked the mausoleum thing. I liked how you could go in, take out a little mini boss, and then get all their armor and weapons. I thought that was a really cool way to give out the armor and weapons. I don't know. I liked that.
he said that Elden Ring DLC would be the size of Limgrave, I knew he was lying, but now I wish he was telling the truth, because somehow
What? I loved how big the world was. I'm so glad it wasn't big. I'm so glad it was bigger than Limgrave. I loved exploring.
how the terrible rewards for exploration are stretched even more thinly than in the base game. Although I could have missed some caves in my boredom, I didn't find any
Boredom? There was not one moment I was bored in this DLC. Not one moment. And I combed through everything. I rode my horse, combed through everything. Yes, I do think there should have been more like caves and stuff to explore, especially down, in the southern area down here. I do think that was a lot of barren area, especially here, a lot of barren area. But man, I loved exploring. We'll talk more. We'll talk more.
caves at all in the three ginormous southern regions of the map. One of those regions being the Abyss, where your horse is too scared to be rideable, so I explored the sea of reskinned rat enemies slowly on foot, only to find more cookbooks. I still can't believe that there are three giant regions in the south of the map that each have nothing of interest besides a single short legacy dungeon.
Okay, I agree. I agree with this. The Fissures was a terrible legacy dungeon that needed to be like 3 times as big. I agree with that.
And Remembrance boss. For a
And the Remembrance boss, I think, needed 2 phases. Putrescent Knight needed 2 phases.
FromSoft game, I was constantly taken aback by how absurdly lazy the DLC was. The entire game, I kept wondering what would be on top of that large green plateau.
Yes, I agree. I agree. This large plateau was very underwhelming. I thought we were going to find another secret boss like Millennia from like the base game, where you go up into the concentrated snowfields and there was Millennia way up at the top, in the Erdtree. I thought that was what this was going to be, and I was excited to fight some crazy super hard boss here, and I was disappointed with this. I agree. The hinterlands should have been a lot more. A lot more.
To the northeast, only to finally discover 2 tree sentinels and a fallen star beast, reskinned overworld boss.
I liked the tree sentinels. The tree sentinels made sense with Shaman Village, but the falling star beast really didn't make any sense for the most part. I mean, I get the gravity type of deal, but for the most part, I don't think that really kind of fell in place there.
Bosses from the last game. This game also brings back dragons, and for the love of God, why?
Because dragons are awesome. I love dragons. I don't care if I have to fight 8 ghost flame dragons. I don't care if they don't have the best hitboxes. They're a cool dead dragon creature, and I love dragons. You can't have too many dragons.
Didn't we fight enough of the 15 million dragons in the base game? I suppose the Dragon Remembrance boss Bale needed a few reskin dragons before his fight, but there shouldn't be any dragons anywhere else.
What? We're in Elden Ring. We're in Elden Ring, where the first lord of the world ever was Placidusix. Like, it's based on dragons. The history of this game.
There's also a few putrid tree spirits in the Shadow Keep, another boss I didn't want to see again. It's jarring to me that this game took 2.5 years to develop, yet most dungeon bosses are NPCs and many overworld bosses are reskins from the last game. I guess all of the money went into the Remembrance bosses and the Shadow Keep, but they still felt the need to make the game way too big, so we ended up with this bloated mess. Another time I was taken aback by the game's laziness was when I completed the Stone Coffin Fissure Legacy dungeon and beat Putrescent Knight, only to be rewarded with a cookbook. They couldn't even have the decency to reward me with a single Shadow Tree fragment. The only intrinsic reward that was consistently good was the environmental art.
Thank you. I was hoping he was going to compliment the environmental art. I love everything is beautiful. It's like a painting. Everything
Every
is
time I discovered
beautiful.
a new region of the map, I would be blown away by its immense beauty. The color theory and the lighting is some of the best I've ever seen in video games, almost like a Bob Ross painting come to life. Of course, when actually exploring most of it, all you find are reskinned enemies, NPC bosses, and empty space, but at least it looks really good. While playing the DLC, I'd constantly be overwhelmed by its ginormous size that rivals the base game. I'm certain that many will praise it for its size, but I do not see bigger as better.
I love the big aspect of it. You could throw me into an empty, huge open world, and I'll still have a blast exploring it. I'll have a blast reading the lore. I'll have a blast picking up useless items and just reading about them in the inventory and seeing what they are. That's just how I am, though. A world doesn't need to be crazy, bugged with tons of enemies. Think back to Lords of the Fallen. Remember how many useless enemies was in that game? There was enemies all over. The world was so packed, and I really, got on that on my review in that. This game, I like how there's a lot of open world aspect just to explore. You're not constantly getting chased around. You can take out your telescope and just look around at times. I love that aspect of it. I love the bigness of it, even if it is empty.
More so than in the base game, the DLC is quantity over quality to the max. Every time I stumbled upon a new beautiful vista, my only thought was, I have to ride my horse through every inch of this boredom to find.
No, whenever I got to a new area, I was like, let's go, let's explore this. I mean, you can watch my Let's Play. I was very enthused. Even if I was just finding cookbooks, I was still like, all right, what's over here? Cool, let's explore this, let's comb through this. I love to immerse myself in these worlds. It's not a wasteland of emptiness. It's a land that you can make the best out of your experience with. I mean, exploring these games, these open world games, that's what it's all about. I love building myself in these games, and I love immersing myself into this world and pretending that I'm in this world and how I would react in this world. And if I was thrown into a world like this, I would just constantly explore. I would ride my horse all over the place. That's just how I am, though. I loved the exploration.
Underwhelming caves with unimportant rewards to eventually find a nugget of interesting content in the Legacy Dungeon. Intrinsically and extrinsically, open world exploration is far worse than in Elden Ring's base game. But what about the Legacy Dungeons? Could these levels give me the traditional Souls-like experience I so desire? There are 6-ish legacy dungeons in the DLC, although some are too tiny to really count. I'll cover the level design of these dungeons separate from the bosses, which I'll analyze later in the video. I'm also going to separate the legacy dungeons into 3 categories, those being small and underwhelming, small and fun, and large and fun. Starting with the largest category, small and underwhelming, we have the first legacy dungeon, Bellurat. The enemy variety here is almost cave levels of bad with the.
Okay, so he's saying how the enemy variety is the same, like that you're fighting the same ghost dudes. Maybe that's what the lore, though. The lore of the Bellurat Tower. I mean, you don't have to have different enemies all over the place. That's kind of ruins the lore, in my opinion. I think it's kind of interesting how these shadow dudes were the only thing we fought in Bellurat. I found that as when I was playing through this, I was like, what is the lore behind this area? Why are there only shadow dudes? I'm not critiquing it like, oh, another shadow dude. That's not how I play games, though. I immerse myself into the lore as I play through.
Same 2 ghost enemies everywhere, and the interconnectivity is by no means amazing. The second legacy dungeon, Castle Ensis.
So Bellurat, I mean, I liked Bellurat. I thought it was a good dungeon. I wish it was longer,
Is worse, to the point that I don't really consider it a legacy dungeon. It's more like a fort with a really difficult boss.
Yeah, I can agree with this to some degree. Castle Enos, I think, should have been more of a legacy dungeon and less of like scaling a fort to fight a boss. There's a difference there from, you know, how you scale a fort to fight a boss at the end and actually a legacy intertwined dungeon that these Souls games create. I do think Castlevania could have been a lot better. I do think so.
Stone Coffin Fissure is the southern dungeon, and it's also pretty short and boring with the same rock turret
I agree with this. The fissure was way too short. The fissure needed to be 3 or 4 times as long to be a proper legacy dungeon.
enemies everywhere. Hey guys, while editing the video, I realized that the bigger issue with the small legacy dungeons is less that they have bad enemy variety, and more that they reuse too many enemies between each other and the open worlds.
But that's just the lore. That's just the world's lore. That's not FromSoft being lazy. That's FromSoft being like, okay, Bloodfiend dudes, they make sense in this area because they have lore here. Or the Belly Rat Tower guys, you know, that's just the lore aspect.
So they feel repetitive. I think I was a bit too negative in this quick analysis, which is because the small legacy dungeons weren't good enough to make up for the empty world surrounding them.
The empty world surrounding them.
Stepping it up into the small and fun dungeons, we have one of my favorites, Midra's Manse.
I liked Midra's Manse. I wish it was probably 3 times as long as well.
This manor has good enemy variety, illusory walls behind paintings, and some solid interconnected level design. I love it when you start from the floor and scale the level to the rafters and then have to do jank platforming while looking down where you once were. It's also really cool how you can hear a man screaming while you complete the dungeon, piquing your interest to go find out what's causing his pain. The game's final dungeon, Near a Limb, is also pretty small like the others, although I liked this one quite a lot.
I liked Near a Limb. I thought it could have been a lot bigger, though. I was expecting, you know, when I saw that cathedral open up, I was picturing something like Code Vein. Maybe not as dangerous as Code Vein and as annoying as Code Vein's cathedral, but that's kind of like what I was hoping it was kind of like. A very like puzzle type of place to go through, very difficult and long, because I was already up to my like episode 49 on my Let's Play, and I was like, how much longer is this game? But at the same time, I wanted it to keep going. And when I saw the cathedral, I was like, oh, dude, this is going to be like another 20 hours of content. But it sadly wasn't, though.
Level design wise, it's nowhere near as good as Midra's Manse, and I think a lot of my enjoyment came from the fact that I like exploring a castle in the sky. There's only one legacy dungeon left to cover, and I saved the best for last, Shadow Keep, which is the only dungeon in the long and fun category.
I agree, Shadowkeep was good. I liked Shadowkeep a lot.
And this one is ginormous. It's like 2 or 3 legacy dungeons smashed into one. The best way to explain it is that it's like if you took High Wall of Lothric, the Grand Archives, and New Londo Ruins, and smashed them all into one level, then you'd get Shadow Keep.
I agree.
I particularly enjoyed traversing the Grand Archives section of the level, where you scale the inside and outside of a library tower in pursuit of the Keep's lore.
I like this a lot, but I don't think there was a build up to Mesmer like there should have been. Mesmer was, you know, put out there as a very tough, crazy boss that we were supposed to encounter, and he was tough. He was tough. He was a fun boss, but he didn't have the build up. You know, even Beetle had a better build up than Mesmer. You know, how the skies got darker. There should have been something building up into this castle being like, okay, because in my playthrough, I wandered on Mesmer by accident. I opened up his door and I was like, crap, I'm walking into Mesmer's room. And I teleported out there because I wasn't ready to fight Mesmer yet. So I think there should have been a better build up to Mesmer there.
Another cool thing about Shadow Keep is that it connects to 7 different plateaus that surround it at different elevations, meaning that you'll enter the Shadow Keep, explore a little, find a coffin that leads to another plateau, then you'll explore that for 5.
So yeah, I liked how Shadowkeep was connected to so many different areas. I liked how you had to go through Shadowkeep to even get to some areas too. That was really cool.
Plus hours before returning to the best level in the game, and this gameplay loop occurs several times. The only problem with this gameplay loop is that some of the plateaus, like the northeast and northwest green ones, are exceptionally boring with.
Okay, the ruins, I do agree with them. I disliked the ruins the most. I think the ruins were one of the most boring areas of the game, and one of the most annoying areas of the game as well. I found myself getting so lost in because everything just looked exactly the same in every area, where it was kind of hard to explore everything because you didn't know if you'd been there already. So I can agree with this. The ruins, I think, should have been something else, maybe another castle of some type or something. But I don't know. They could have done better here, I think.
Tons of free-skinned enemies, empty space, and no caves, but I digress. Shadowkeep is the best part of the DLC by far. It's so good that I wish the overworld was shrunk down to a quarter of its size, and that the DLC was just the Shadowkeep connecting you to other legacy dungeons.
I think that could have worked. I think they could have made a really cool DLC like that. But at the same time, I like what they did. I like the open world aspect. I know some people hate the open world aspect, but this is Elden Ring. This is not Dark Souls. This is Elden Ring. Remember that.
And a few small overworld zones full of things to find, but that isn't what we got. Although it's good that there is a fantastic level in the DLC, I can't help but feel like it came at the cost of other legacy dungeons shrinking in size as they got less attention. This is a very big problem, as there are entire regions of the map that are almost completely empty outside of their legacy dungeon. And when those dungeons are super short, that means the only good reward for exploration isn't really worth the cost of riding torrent around every inch of the overworld's empty wasteland. So exploration is not very good, and the legacy dungeons are a mixed bag.
Exploration is not very good. Bro, what? Are we playing the same game? I loved the exploration aspect. Okay, Abyssal Woods, I think, is the one exception to that. I think Abyssal Woods should have had a lot more stuff in it. There was this waterfall area. If you go up north, I think it was northwest, I think there should have been like some boss there or a cave or some type of dungeon there, small dungeon or something maybe. Abyssal Woods was very empty. I agree with that aspect, but man, the exploration aspect is the best part of Elden Ring.
Which only leaves one thing left to talk about, the boss battles. And just like with exploration, a lot of people are pointing out that something just isn't right with these bosses. Something just isn't fun anymore.
I don't know what you're talking about. I liked the bosses. Radon even grew on me. You know, at first I really hated the final boss, but after beating him for a fourth time without any summons, I liked the boss. I like him.
Some say the biggest problem is that the bosses never stop attacking, while others say their damage is overtuned, and I'm here to disagree with all of them, not because they aren't valid complaints, but because it isn't the biggest issue. In my In Defense of Elden Ring boss design video, I chose not to use healing items to prove that every boss is beatable in an aggressive playstyle without hit trading. However, this caused me to avoid the absolute worst part of Elden Ring boss design, which is the healing speed. When fought
The healing speed, I think healing speed is fine. I think Elden Ring has a very fast healing speed.
optimally, Elden Ring bosses have a very tight flow with tons of roll catches to punish imprecise play with high damage.
Yes, there are a lot of roll catches, but this just sounds like a skill issue. I mean, that you learn and adapt to get better at that.
Once you take 1 or 2 hits, you'll already be low enough to want to back out and heal.
This is only true if you don't level up your shadow tree fragments. If you level up your shadow tree fragments like you're supposed to, these bosses don't hit all that hard. They give you plenty of time to get attacks in, take a few attacks, trade a few attacks, attack, and then get a heal in. They're plenty balanced. I think a lot of people went through this DLC without leveling up shadow tree fragments, and we're getting wrecked by these bosses, because if you don't level up your shadow tree fragments, yeah, you get hit one time by the boss and your health bar shrinks super small and you gotta heal. You gotta level up your shadow tree fragments though, and then it's balanced just like the base game is.
So you'll roll backwards into the boss's roll catch and die. But let's say you actually do get out and heal. The boss can either run directly into your face and do a melee combo to drain the health right away.
That's because of input reading. Input reading has been very popularly added in Elden Ring and, you know, Dark Souls. It's just input reading. I mean, I honestly, input reading is not going to go anywhere. I'm sure they're going to keep putting it in their games, but I do think it's a little overdone, and it definitely is annoying. It definitely is annoying when when the boss isn't doing anything and you click heal. The second you click heal, then he attacks you with some crazy AoE attack. I do agree with that. I think input reading is taken too far.
Or they can pelt you with magic combos, which in the case of Rolana can be a 5-part spell combo with roll catches that's harder to dodge at a distance to.
You can dodge this. I mean, once you learn this fight is not hard. Look at my Get Good guide. We completely wreck her on my Get Good guide. We dismantle her.
Punish your healing. I'd find myself often having to spend 5 healing items just to get to full once. Now let's look at a good game like Sekiro.
A good game like Sekiro. I like Sekiro. Sekiro is one of my favorite games ever. I really do enjoy that one. I think they did a lot of things right, almost everything right in that game.
If I'm fighting that game's final boss Ishin, I can heal at mid-range, which prompts Ishin to attack, and I have time to deflect before the heal is over.
I do like that. I see what he's saying here. I see what he's saying here about being able to heal in the midst of battle and being able to block right as the attack. But I don't think that has to do with the... I think that's just game design. I think that's just the fact that you're playing as a samurai in Sekiro, you know, where you're supposed to be fast, fluid, agile. In Elden Ring, we're the Tarnished. We're not a samurai. We're Tarnished. We don't, you know, it's a different gameplay mechanic. I don't think we're supposed to be able to heal really super quick and get back into battle. I don't think that's what they designed the Tarnish to be.
In Sekiro and Bloodborne, the healing speed feels purposefully designed so that if you get far enough away, you'll have just enough time to heal and get back into the fight.
Because it was combat too. That just flowed with the combat. That's just how Sekiro was made. It was just that flowed with everything else in the game. The combat in that game was like a dance. Elden Ring is not like a dance, nor was it never intended to be.
While in Elden Ring, it feels purposefully designed that if I heal, there's always a chance the boss can hit me and I can't do anything about it.
Is the internet
And that's just a game mechanic.
signal any better now?
Why did we get internet from this cell phone company?
You can sometimes get away with waiting for a charged heavy opening to heal, but since the boss's posture bar is always lowering, I'd rather just take the charged heavy and only heal after posture break. The issue with healing isn't just a problem with some bosses, it's every Remembrance boss. I genuinely believe that if healing speed was increased to 1.5 to 2 times, a good amount of the difficulty complaints would resolve. This seems like an easy fix for FromSoft to add, but they will never do it because they want you to die a bunch.
I don't think that's true. I think FromSoft just likes making hard games. I just think when they designed the healing speed, they felt that was good. I think the healing speed is plenty fine. Maybe it could be a little bit faster for a little bit more enjoyment, but this is not something I think about when I play Elden Ring. I don't think about, oh man, I wish I could have healed faster.
In my last Elden Ring video, I pointed out that the game is terrible at communicating how to fight the bosses in a fun way.
But that's the fun of it, though. The fun of it was the first time I fought Margit and wandered in on him in my first ever playthrough, I got wrecked by that dude over like 30 times completely because I didn't know the mechanics of the game. I didn't understand Sagger. I didn't understand Poise Break. That was me learning, though. Like, I had to learn that aspect. I like how the game doesn't hold your hand and say, okay, you can jump and do a stagger attack. It breaks their poise. I don't like being walked through a game like that. That's the fun of Elden Ring. That's the fun of Souls games in general, is just the fact that you're thrown into this world and you're going to get your ass kicked tons of times before you figure out how to beat the boss.
They don't show the posture bar, or indicate jumpable attacks, or teach the...
And I don't want them to. You know, that was good in Sekiro, because Sekiro, it felt like a dance when that happened. You know, it came up with a warning that it was going to be an unblockable attack. That felt right in Sekiro. That would feel misplaced in this game. I'm glad Elden Ring does not do that.
Player positioning openings with a teaching boss. I thought this was because it was too hard to teach the player game mechanics in an open world where they can go anywhere. But after the DLC, I realized that I was an overly optimistic idiot. The reason why these bosses don't communicate anything to the player is because they don't want the vast majority of players to learn how to fight the boss.
That's not true. FromSoft, they designed these bosses to be able to learn them after time. You can learn all these bosses. Look at my Get Good guide. And then compare that to my Let's Play. My Let's Play, I get wrecked by some of these bosses, like R'Lana. I died to her so many times, and after a while, after my 4th playthrough, and after doing a Get Good guide, I completely destroy her now.
Bosses in a fun way. Take an example like Bale. He has an instant damage roar knockdown into lightning spam that he combos with melee attacks after. A challenge runner might notice the tiniest visual cue, like with how he slightly brings his head forward before doing the roar. But that cue is purposefully hidden because the developers don't want you to figure out how to dodge the damage.
They want to hide it. They want the player to experiment. They want the player to die a lot to learn these battles. This is just Souls games. He's just defining Souls games right now.
They want you to get hit and then spam roll the lightning and then die to a melee attack and complain to your friends about how once again they made the hardest game you've ever played. While editing the video, I realized that the main tell for Bale's roar isn't head movement, but his right foot moving forward slightly, which is difficult to notice in the heat of battle. I would not have noticed this without reviewing my footage to make the video. This will be especially hard to see if the camera is stuck inside his body.
I do agree with the camera. I think for all big enemy fights, the camera needs to be zoomed out. I think that needs to be, I think that helped the fights a lot if the camera was zoomed out on any type of big fights, like the fire giant, any type of big dragon fight. The camera needs to just be zoomed out and give more area to see there. I think that'd help a lot.
Microsoft has completely lost the plot. It's no longer about making a fun game for the majority of players that is also hard. It's about hiding the intended way to play behind obscurity so that you either need to die hundreds of times through trial and error learning the boss.
That's a Souls game. You're just telling me what a Souls game is. That's why we play Souls games. I would not want to play a game that I just beat the boss real super easy. Now, don't get me wrong. I do like to play easier games at times. I don't like to just torture myself with Souls games. But when I play a Souls game, like, that is my mentality. I'm like, I'm going to get killed by this boss at least 25 times before I figure him out. That's okay. That's part of the strategy. That's part of the learning the bosses, trying new techniques, and then, you know, conquering him eventually and feeling that feeling of success.
Or you have to research challenge runner footage to learn the boss. For those of us who want to overcome the boss without copying other strategies or doing tons of trial and error.
This is not true. My first playthrough, I never looked at one video online. I was able to beat every boss with enough dies and enough tries. I was able to figure out everything myself. You don't need to look at videos online to teach you how to fight these bosses.
This makes the learning process extremely unfun. Pair this with insane tracking to punish positioning openings, high damage, slow healing speed, and 1.5 million delayed attacks that you need to learn through trial and error, and the bosses are simply not fun to
Yeah, they are. They're super fun to learn, and that's just a Souls game in general.
Learn at all. I need at least faster healing speed and probably a Shadows Die Twice revival mechanic to make this start to feel fun. The reason why FromSoft fans who disliked Elden Ring boss design looked back fondly on Sekiro was because it was a hard game that gave the player tools to help learn boss movesets more quickly. They showed the posture bar, jumping attacks, stab attacks, had fast healing speed.
Because the combat in Sekiro is supposed to be like a dance. That is not what Elden Ring was designed for. You're just comparing two different games. There is Sekiro, a game right here, and there is Elden Ring, a game right here. Both totally different types. One is an apple and one is an orange. You can't compare them. They're made by the same company. They have things similar, but they are different in the way they play. And you have to remember that when you critique things.
Allowed you to cancel attacks and gave you revives. Is Sekiro beatable without any of these tools? Yes. Would it be a lot harder? Of course. But would it be more fun? I think the answer is obvious. Let's say a boss like Rellana takes me a little under 4 hours to beat. The first 2 to 3 hours aren't actually beatable because I haven't learned enough of their moveset. By the final 30 minutes, the boss starts becoming fun in a challenge run, I have to dodge 1 billion attacks sort of way, but I had to suffer through hours of boring trial and error dying while healing to get there, which was not fun at all. This means
if he would have left and explored the world and leveled up his Shadow Tree fragments, he wouldn't have had to die 4 hours to her.
that the majority of my time spent fighting the bosses on my first playthrough was not fun.
That's why Elden Ring is so good, in my opinion, because if you get stuck on a boss, you're not tied to that boss. You can leave, you can explore other areas to try to get more powerful, to level up. It's just like an isekai anime like that you watch. You know, the character levels up and gets powerful as the show moves on, and he explores the world and takes in all the areas of effect to, you know, make him stronger, and then he destroys the boss and becomes OP, obviously, because it's an isekai anime. But this is kind of that same aspect. You know, if you're stuck on a boss, I love in Elden Ring how you can just leave and forget about it for a while, go find some caves, go set your mind on other adventures, and then come back later and just totally wreck them.
Pair this up with the majority of exploration being boring, and the majority of legacy dungeons being underwhelming.
And another thing on that too, it's cool how you can make the game as difficult as you want. Elden Ring does not need an easy mode. If you want an easy mode, you can watch my easy guide walkthrough, you know, where we level up the shadow tree fragments really high off the start, and then we destroy a lot of the bosses early on super easy. That's easy mode. But you can also make the game super hard by not leveling up your shadow tree fragments and going to fight the lion, divine beast lion, right off the bat, and that's going to be a completely different fight. I love that aspect.
And all of the three main elements I play Souls games for are not very good in the DLC. I feel like I'm seeing an almost cult-like response from some FromSoft fans against the difficulty criticism. They'll say things like, "You're complaining that the games known for being hard are hard. Stop complaining, get good."
And yeah, I'm going to agree with that. I'm going to agree that with the get good people, I mean, that's just Souls games. You get better as you play these games. They're supposed to be hard.
I think this sentiment is so absurdly stupid on so many levels.
It's not, though.
Firstly, hard doesn't and has never equated to good game design.
Depending on the game. Not all games are designed to be Souls games where they destroy you mentally. Souls games are designed to beat you mentally. I'll never forget my first ever playthrough of Dark Souls 3. I was stuck on the tutorial boss, Dark Souls 3, you know, in the graveyard, Gondir, or I can't think of his name. I was stuck on that dude forever. I was literally stuck on that dude. That dude just tormented me because I wasn't good at Souls games yet. And, you know, it's like, once I beat him, though, that just felt like this was a different type of game. This felt like a game I was supposed to suffer in, and I enjoyed that. It's just a different type of game.
Mario The Lost Levels is much harder than the original Mario, yet the first Mario is definitely the better game for the majority of players. FromSoft creates entertainment. These games are not sacred relics with challenges that are inherently good, because it's technically possible to do every boss hitless if you look up a guide, or spend an obscene amount of hours doing trial and error deaths fighting it. It's uncanny to me how cult-like this community can be.
It's not cult-like, we just like FromSoft. We like the fact that FromSoft makes these really, really challenging games that makes us beat our heads against a wall to figure out. This is just the type of game that we like. As FromSoft people that like FromSoft games, we just like hard games. That's what we enjoy. Now, if I want to play an easy game, sure, I can go turn on an easier game in my library if I want to clear my head with something easy. But when I play these games, I'm expecting to get my ass kicked.
I think it's rooted in the fact that FromSoft made a reputation for designing hard games that weren't actually hard. Dark Souls 1 isn't hard, it's just unique, and it punishes people who don't try to learn its unique.
The first time I ever played Dark Souls, I was challenged. You know, these games have evolved. You know, obviously back then you didn't have the particle effects and the AoE attacks because these games have evolved with time. You know, we live in the 21st century. We go back to the old games now, Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3, and they're going to be easy now. Well, I mean, not easy. I mean, we'll still be challenged to some degree, but they're going to be a lot easier than Elden Ring, though. There's no doubt about that.
Mechanics. With Shadow of the Erdtree, this is completely not true at all. This game is absurdly difficult for the sake of being difficult.
Honestly, it's as hard as you want to make it out to be. If you want the game to be easier, you can level up your shadow tree fragments. If you don't want it to be as hard, you don't level up them, or you don't level them up as much. You choose to make the DLC as hard as you want it to. The people that are saying, oh, it's the hardest DLC ever. Yeah, if you don't level stuff up, yeah, it can easily be said as the hardest game DLC ever made, without question. But if you level stuff up, this is not the hardest game. Liza P is a harder game, I think.
They like the way you stir it. Oh, cheesy. They like to eat it up.
There's this Souls-like cycle where a new game comes out, people rage about the difficulty, and then a few years later, people say it was never all that hard and you just had to adapt. I firmly believe that Elden Ring DLC has broken the cycle. This game will always be seen as hard.
Once again, it's as hard as you make it out to be. I've done 4 playthroughs of this now, and I completely wreck the bosses now at this point.
Sure, some challenge runners might be like, oh, I fought the boss for a ton of hours, now I can do every boss hitless, but it took a ton of hours to get there, or they were looking up other people's strategies on the internet. The way I see it, FromSoft encountered a problem. How do we keep up our reputation of making hard games if we aren't introducing any new base mechanics that are difficult to master, since it's still just dodge hit? The answer is quadruple the damage, double the boss health bars, and hide the intended openings and ways to avoid attacks underneath several layers of trial and error and obscurity. If you dislike this design approach, that's fine. I don't like it either, and no game is above criticism because
Once again, this is just an evolution. They've evolved over time. The AoE attacks, they couldn't have done that with their old engines, with Dark Souls 1 and 2. I'm sure if they could have added that in back then, they could have, and they would have. This is just an evolution of games in general. Games are becoming harder because they can add more into it. They can add more effects into it. This is just game design in general now.
the developer has a good reputation. Personally, one of my biggest issues with the boss design isn't just that some bosses are hard, it's that all the bosses are over the top. Elden Ring
No, not all the bosses are over the top. There are some easy ones.
base game has dynamics in its difficulty that crescendoed towards the end, while the DLC is always hitting the highest note, and I don't find that fun. I find it tiring. Whenever I find a new boss, it doesn't feel rewarding. It feels like a punishment.
No, not at all. Whenever I found a new boss in the DLC, I was ready to, I went into the DLC whenever I came across a boss, I was expecting to die a lot to it, and I was kind of disappointed on my first playthrough how some bosses were very easy to me. Some bosses, yes, were very challenging indeed, but some of the bosses I felt needed 2 health bars. I think Bale should have been way harder. I think Bale should have been this dragon that, was on par with Midir. Midir was a crazy hard fight. I struggled with Midir for so long. Bale, yeah, I struggled with him for a little bit, but then I got the Ancient Dragon Katana. I beat him probably no problem. It's like, I don't know. It sounds like a skill.
Get hit a few times, try to heal, and die. I'm certain a counter argument to my criticisms is that I should just use summons or an overpowered build if I dislike the boss mechanics. But me using split aggro or an overpowered build to ignore the mechanics doesn't make me like learning the boss mechanics.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with using summons. I've used summons in my Let's Play. I use summons in the Easy Guide walkthrough. They make the game kind of fun, even.
Skipping boss mechanics doesn't make me enjoy them, and I am tired of this brain-dead FromSoft cult-like response to avoid all criticism, and to act like their game has no flaws because you can skip some parts of it if you don't like it. Part of the reason I find it so annoying to argue with FromSoft fans is because they always start every conversation from the perspective that every complaint is your fault in some way, get good, Miyazaki games are inherently perfect. It's so...
No, they're not perfect. I'm going to say right now, Miyazaki's games are not perfect by any means, but they are masterpieces. And a masterpiece is not always perfect. There's, Witcher 3, I say, is a masterpiece, but it's not perfect. There are problems with Witcher 3, but it's still a masterpiece. That's how I think of this game as well. There are still problems. It's not perfect.
Brain dead, like they aren't individuals who think for themselves, but cult members preaching their creed. Also, if I end up using in-game tools to skip learning bosses, I wouldn't derive any positive or negative emotions from the bosses, and the only reason to play the game would be exploration, and I find the exploration of this DLC to be extremely underwhelming and
I enjoyed exploration in this game. I really enjoyed it.
barren, so it would not improve my experience. Before moving on, I should specify that I don't hate all the bosses once mastered, except the ones with terrible cameras, but I really
I agree, Bale should have had a better camera, Divine Beast, Dancing Lion should have had a better camera. Trying to think if there's any other big bosses that should have had a better camera, but I agree, the camera could have been better on some of these.
dislike learning all of the boss movesets, and they made my first playthrough very much not fun. I'm now going to analyze all the bosses individually that have moves I consider over the top. It's worth noting that this video represents my experience of fighting the bosses without looking up hitless challenge run videos, and it's very likely that I have not fully optimized all of the boss movesets and openings. First up is Dancing Lion. He starts out hard but fair, then in phase 2 he switches between 3 elemental forms. In his lightning form, lightning shocks appear all across the arena to stagger you out of your openings. This was the little sprinkle of bull the boss needed to have to go from fun to aggravating.
I can kind of agree with this. The lightning strikes around him did make the lightning phase the most worst phase to fight him with. I do agree with that.
His ice phase was also annoying, since with every attack, a bunch of ice
I disagree with that. The ice phase is one of the easiest phases to punish him on. You can just jump over all the ice.
damage would just appear around his body, but it wasn't too high and you could just jump it, so it was more manageable than the lightning form. Midra, Lord of Frenzied Flame, is actually an amazing boss that isn't too hard to figure out. I love her design and graceful attack rhythm.
Did he say her? Midra is a dude. Oh, okay. I thought Midra's Frenzied Flame form was female because of the body shape, but he's a guy. Yeah, it's if you watch the cutscene, it's a dude. It's just a dude.
And her openings are easy to find. The only issue is that Midra is especially bad at killing people who try to heal with her million spell attacks and fire roll catches. The Mother of Fingers is a difficult boss that I find fun, but it's
I actually disliked the Metria Mother of Fingers just because it was an annoying boss to fight, but that's just me.
some point in the fight, she just spawns 3 add-on hand enemies. It's so stupid. You know,
I get that lore-wise it makes sense for the Mother of Fingers to give birth to fingers, but lore-wise it also makes sense for other bosses to have soldiers in their arena. They don't because it'd make the gameplay worse.
what would make Elden Ring great? If Godric had a few soldiers of Godric, or if we threw in a Knight of Mesmer into Mesmer's boss arena. This isn't a slow Dark Souls 2 boss, it's Elden Ring, and we don't need add-ons in the boss arena. Also in Phase 2, the Mother of Fingers will sometimes spam spell attacks like Elden Beast, which is also annoying. Commander Gaius is further proof that horse combat sucks balls.
I do agree with this. Commander Gaius, if they wanted us to fight on the horse, they should have made horse combat better.
I genuinely hate it. This is a boar boss who never lets you heal, but is faster and more aggressive than other bosses since you're designed to fight it on a horse. But the horse doesn't have any iframes, and if he dies, you have to click through a stupid menu prompt for him to
They fixed that. You no longer have to click through the menu prompt. It's already set to just double click A and you'll respawn your horse.
revive. Eventually, I just gave up and used the horse to dodge Gaius's oversized charge hitbox, then fought the boss melee. Some people enjoy horse combat because they use the iframes in your mount and dismounting animation to avoid attacks, which I think is the stupidest mechanic I've ever seen in
I think that's a neat I think that's a fine mechanic, being able to dodge attacks by using your horse. I do that with dragons all the time. When a dragon comes down to try to stomp on you and stuff, I a lot of times will spawn my horse the second before he does that, and I won't get hit by that. I think that's a neat mechanic, and it's utilizing Torrent in a way that I feel like Melina wanted us to originally, lore-wise, utilize Torrent. That's just me personally, though.
a FromSoft game. Yeah, I'll dodge the boss. Just let me get off of the horse while his sword goes through me.
But I do think Gaius's hitbox for the charge attack needs to be reworked. That attack, the dodging attack, the charge attack is on Gaius is broken. That I feel needs to be patched so you could actually roll through that a little easier, just because it's very messed up. The only way I've beat this dude is using a shield.
That's really stupid, and I'm not going to do it. Just give the horse iframes on the dodge. Mesmer is a really cool boss.
Metro presents a tale of two wireless customers.
I've been a loyal customer since today.
Forever.
Which means
Sometimes his combos go on a bit too long before you get an opening, and while it's possible I haven't optimized the boss's jumping openings, his tracking is so insanely good that I couldn't find any positioning openings during his massive combos. I particularly enjoyed Mesmer's Phase 2 snake transformation attacks, as it escalated the epicness of the fight, although his explosion into multi-snake bite attack seemed a bit like a very hard to learn attack that the developer hopes does at least some damage. On the bright side, his snake phase introduces a new opening, since every time his snake form dissipates you can land a jumping or fully charged heavy attack. Moving on to the bosses that have higher levels of it's insane that Rolana is only the second boss. Her damage is extremely overtuned.
It's because the game wants you to explore and get more Shadow Tree fragments. I've done Rolana by just getting the Shadow Tree fragments in the first part and then going to Enos Castle, and it's not that hard of a fight. You need to explore this game and you need to get the Shadow Tree fragments. That's what this is all about.
FromSoft defenders will say that you just need to level your Shadow Tree blessings, and that
Exactly.
Lana is like the market of the DLC. While they are technically correct, this doesn't sit well with me, because with Margit you're a weak character having to upgrade multiple progression trees through exploration to become strong enough to fight him, while with R'Lana you're a high-leveled character on the second DLC boss who is stuck because you need.
But this is just the way that they intended it to, and I'm glad they made it like this. So I was really afraid that I was going to go in with my character, my Elden Lord character, my 200, my level 200, and I was afraid I was going to destroy everything in this DLC. It was such a relief when I got to R'Lana that I was killed over and over in my Let's Play, and I was thinking, this is great, this is fun, this is going to be a good challenge.
Need to collect a single item to improve your stats, and that just seems really lame to me. Either way, the boss is kind of stupid. Her combo extenders seem to go on forever, her tracking is insanely fast, making positioning openings hard to pull off, and she aggressively punishes healing with melee attacks and spells.
You can use the tier that absorbs damage as health, and you can just wreck her second phase. If you want to know how to do that, look at my Get Good guide. I explain exactly how to do that, and you just destroy her right off the bat.
She also roll catches incorrect dodge roll directions with her two swords, making it hard to back out and heal, and she has a 5-part spell combo with roll catches built in. When a boss has this many roll catches, it sometimes feels less like I'm fighting a boss and more like I'm fighting the developer. When R'Lana is near death, she does a triple moon staggered chain one-shot combo that hits the entire arena. After I first saw this attack, I literally said, "That's a streamer bait attack."
I mean, yeah, I agree. I first said that's a bullshit attack, but then I realized, oh, they want us to use the Wolf Crest shield that we find right before R'Lana, and we can just hold up that shield and not get hit at all. They want us to explore these legacy dungeons and utilize the tools that they put there for us. That's what this is about.
It's made to get reactions and add an extra hour of length to the fight in case you had a good run on your hands with a one-shot that you didn't know how to dodge. There's probably some way to optimize R'Lana's fight with jumping or positioning openings, but I didn't enjoy the boss with her ginormous long combo extenders and roll catches, so I did a fair bit of hit trading to break her posture and win quicker. There's only 2 bosses left to cover, and I saved the hardest bosses for last. Next up is Bale the Dread. It's almost like Miyazaki heard challenge runners like me saying that Dark Eater Midir wasn't all that hard, and he
Midir? Midir was a hard fight. Midir is probably one of the hardest Souls fights of all time, in my opinion. I struggled with him big time.
He said, "Alright, I'll show you a hard dragon fight. This boss is almost mechanically identical to Midir, but way, way harder."
No way. No way. Midir is way harder than Bale. Way harder than Bale. Put in the comments if you agree with me on this. Bale is nowhere near as hard as Midir.
It's a dragon fight with a focus on hitting the head. Similar to Midir, Bale breathes fire at his feet to punish people attacking his body. He also shoots fire straight out, but to add an extra pinch of bullshit, the fire hitbox will stray a little in the middle to hit you. Where the real issues with Bale start are in his melee combos. On his second melee attack, he makes the dodge roll timing harder by using both arms, and it's easier to dodge if you roll forward right underneath him, which means that you have to dodge his follow-up attacks underneath him with the camera stuck in his body so that it's harder to see. Bale also charges at the player constantly, which gets the camera stuck in his body as well. Bale vs. Midir is a perfect example of FromSoft pursuing difficulty for difficulty's sake. Midir's hitboxes were smaller, so you could always roll backwards from his melee attacks and keep the camera locked onto his front side. But with Bale, the camera is always stuck in his body, making the fight simply not fun.
I just wish they, like I said, would zoom the camera out a bit for these fights. For these fights, I think this zoomed out camera would help a lot.
Then Bale steps it up in Phase 2 where he just never stops attacking. This is especially frustrating because his damage is turned up to 11 and his health bar is ginormous for an Elden Ring boss. I discovered that his lightning wing stabs give you a rolling light attack opening in Phase 2 if you roll right, which helped me with the lack of openings. I somewhat enjoyed how over the top the boss was in his Phase 2 with giant explosions after his attacks, but I'll also say that it was a bit too visually cluttered for such a difficult boss.
I don't agree. I think the visual effects on Bale were absolutely insane, and I loved every second of it. I didn't even, the first time I ever got to a second phase, I was just so floored by what I saw in the cinematic presentation that they gave me. I didn't care that I was one shot then when he landed.
The only boss left to cover is the final boss of the DLC, Promised Consort Radahn. I know some of you are probably expecting me to outright hate this overly difficult boss, and I definitely hate parts of it, but I'm also a bit conflicted. In a DLC that's main theme is about being difficult for difficulty's sake, frankly, I'd probably be disappointed if the final boss wasn't the hardest boss of any FromSoft game. Also, I said earlier that one of my biggest issues with the boss design was the lack of dynamics in the difficulty. I'm somewhat okay with Radahn or Melania being over the top to make a narrative and gameplay point. Although I'm not opposed to the ending boss having extreme difficulty, I do think that some of the ways he achieves this difficulty is incredibly cheap. First of all, he has a 3-hit slash combo that I consider to be undodgeable on a medium roll. Now, this isn't actually true. Across my 11 hours of fighting Radahn, I dodged the attack multiple times, but the timing was so precise that I could not dodge it consistently.
It just takes practice. Once you do a little practice on that, these dodges, his first phase is super simple once you get down the dodges.
You have to dodge his initial swing and the roll catch in a single roll to avoid it. I couldn't find a dodge roll direction trick to make it much easier. Either way, it's obvious to me that From wanted this attack to be so difficult to dodge that
it is a hard attack to dodge, though. It did take me a long time to learn that one.
It would appear undodgeable to many players, so they would die more often. However,
yeah, I mean, I agree that one is hard to dodge.
This isn't the worst way Radahn achieves his difficulty. In Phase 2, Mikola jumps on Radahn's back and starts spamming spells everywhere, meaning that you have to play close to Radahn to get openings in without getting hit by the magic. This is all fine and good, but sometimes when Radahn turns his back to me mid-combo, I literally can't see his model through Mikola's hair, and then I die. This is made worse by the fact that Radahn is essentially delayed attack combos the boss.
Okay, I do agree with this. I do think sometimes his attacks in Phase 2 were hard to see coming.
Every attack is delayed, and many of his combos look similar but have different timings to trick you into getting hit. That in and of itself is an annoying way to achieve difficulty, but paired with me not being able to see which delay he's doing, it's just bullshit. If you do end up getting hit at mid-range by the magic, the particle effects obscure Radahn to make it harder to see when to dodge. I really don't like visual clutter as a new form of difficulty. Also, Mikola has a 2-shot grab attack with an oversized hitbox that kills you at any health if you get.
Actually, his grab attack is probably the easiest to dodge in the whole entire game. It's as soon as he jumps off the ground, you dodge. It's that easy. And he jumps very slowly, too, at you.
Hit twice. A difficult FromSoft boss would not be complete without a terrible grab hitbox. Phase 2 Radahn's dodge roll timings are incredibly difficult to learn because he will do multiple clone attacks in a row that makes it hard to see where the damage is coming from.
So for light speed, you just stand inside of him. You run inside of him, or you sidestep it, and you can just dodge all that.
He can also do a meteor attack into a clone combo into a high damage death explosion attack. I could not figure out how to dodge this, so I started using Bloodhound Step, and I would usually still get hit a bit. After a few days, I saw a challenge runner dodge it by jumping away backwards right from the meteor, and then continuously running back right to avoid all the clone attacks without dodging, but I did not figure this out during my run. If Radahn's seemingly infinite range purple gravity suction attack lands in Phase 2, he does the most over-the-top death combo to punish you. I don't even think you can avoid all of the damage after getting hit by the initial attack. Because of my deaths to the hard-to-dodge roll-catch combo and hard-to-understand clone attacks, and worst of all, to Mikola's hair, I was more angered by this boss than any other FromSoft boss, to the point that I almost said, "This is stupid, I don't enjoy the game anymore, I'm gonna summon, get a Great Shield, and skip this bullshit boss." However, before I fully gave up, I decided to switch to a bleed build, and after 11 hours of total fighting, I managed to carve out a victory, which means that this boss took me longer to beat than any other FromSoft boss at a normal level, and is the only boss that ever got me to build switch. After I won, sure, I felt a sense of happiness and relief, but was it fun entertainment? No, not really. I was happy at the end because the suffering was over, not because I enjoyed the experience. Do you guys remember when FromSoft used to make fun games that challenged you in a unique way? I never thought difficulty was From's #1 priority. I thought difficulty was one tool they used to enhance the art. But now difficulty seems like the
I can somewhat agree with that to a point, but I still think Souls games are supposed to just be difficult. And I think that's part of the art that these games are. I do want to go back there real quick, though, to this fight. I think this was it.
was one tool they used.
Yeah, Sister Freed. I still hate this fight. This is still one, like, my least favorite Souls fight of all time. Not because I died the most to her, just because this was just an annoying fight. Yeah, just wanted to put that out there.
To enhance the art. But now difficulty seems like the entire point of their games, and I don't think I'm enjoying it anymore. This DLC felt more like a job than entertainment to me. I guess From achieved one important thing with Radahn, which was to make a boss so hard that it'd probably take me hours to learn even with Mimic Tier. Summoning truly has become the intended normal mode. On a side note, I wasn't a huge fan of the story. FromSoft games have good lore, but the in-game stories are becoming stale and predictable. There are gods. Kill them. Every time. I thought maybe something would happen with helping Mikola ascend or something, but no. You never find him until the end, and then you kill him.
Alright, so talk about the story a bit. I didn't mind it. I thought it was cool how we had to find his leftover, crest marks that he left over the Land of Shadow. I thought that was kind of cool. I wish that was intertwined more to the story, like, as a whole, because as a whole, you don't have to do that. You don't have to find those crest marks. You don't have to report back to Osbach or Ansbach. I feel like that should have been something we kind of had to do, maybe, and I feel like there should have been more of that kind of search out kind of stuff. I feel like that could have been good. But I do agree that the ending of the game was very anticlimactic, and I was disappointed with the end. I was in my Let's Play. I was like, "That's it? Where's the secret boss at?" I wanted more. There was something. The fact that we couldn't even go up onto the stairs to the Tower of Divinity, or the Gate of Divinity, that kind of irritated me too. I really wanted to just go up there and look out and see what was up there. I don't know. Just a small detail there. And of course, another
Need
ad.
life insurance? Taking the first step is easy.
I remember back when Matthew Matosis criticized Dark Souls 2 for wanting to kill the player more than it wanted to be a good game, pointing out things like the Firekeepers laughing about how much you'll die in the beginning, and the hub world having a death count. Matthew Matosis quoted Miyazaki as saying, "Difficulty was never the point. The games weren't designed to be challenging just for the sake of it. It was a way to pull you into the world." I think Miyazaki has lost sight of his original vision.
Side note there, Slave Knight Gale, one of my favorite all-time Souls bosses ever. I love that boss fight.
Difficulty definitely seems like the point of the DLC. In this way, Shadow of the Erdtree feels more like Dark Souls 2 than any other Souls game, although it achieves the difficulty in very different ways. Many of the bosses did not feel like immersive fights to me. It felt more like the developer trying to trick me into dying as much as possible to the high damage roll catches and delayed attacks, and my inability to safely heal. Shadow of the Erdtree is the only Miyazaki-led Souls title that I wish never existed. If instead—
What? No. Shadow? No. I'm just gonna say no for that. I loved it. I'm glad it exists.
the time was spent developing Elden Ring 2, they could reset the difficulty and progression trees, giving me a reason to explore a new open world. This DLC reminds me a lot of Tears of the Kingdom.
Tears of the Kingdom was bad. I disliked that game a lot. I thought that game was very boring. I know lots of people loved it. I never even finished it. It was just boring.
It's not as content barren as that game, but both games allowed me to take off my rose-colored glasses and see the open world genre for all its flaws. I once saw Elden Ring as an unrivaled masterpiece when it came to exploration, and while I still think base game Elden Ring is the best open world I've ever played, it also does fall prey to all of the shortcomings of open world game design. The good content is spread thin across vast expanses of empty space and
but that's supposed to be that way though. It's just like if you went outside, okay? Let's think you go outside your house. That's a vast land. there's not going to be much stuff. But if you keep driving, you're eventually going to get to a town. That's the same thing here. That's the same thing.
And underwhelming side dungeons. Breath of the Wild proved that people will enjoy doing boring if it feels like their discovery and they get a reward. And Elden Ring DLC took out the reward part of the formula, and it does not work at all. Now I think I'm getting over this open world craze. That's not to say I wouldn't enjoy an Elden Ring 2, but I think I'd enjoy a linear, more condensed experience.
No, I know a lot of people don't like the open world and want a linear approach, but that is Souls game. That is, you know, the Dark Souls series. Dark Souls is for linear. Elden Ring is their new branch for open world Souls, and I like the open world Souls format. I like it a lot. Just something about Elden Ring. It's going to be one of my favorite games of all time just because of that open world aspect, the exploration, the immersiveness that you can put yourself into this world, explore, go about it at your own pace, and go the directions you want. That was one of my critiques of Dark Souls. You know, Dark Souls, you're on a linear path. If you can't beat the boss, you're kind of screwed in a way. You have to kind of go back and farm enemies till you're more powerful. But it's not the same thing as Elden Ring, where if you get stuck, you can just go out and explore and come back later. This is a brand new way to play Souls games, and I freaking love it. I love the open world aspect. So fun.
Over this. If the next Zelda or FromSoft game is open world, I hope it's a smaller open world with quality as the main focus instead of quantity, and in FromSoft's case, fun as the focus instead of difficulty. I've been pretty negative throughout this video, so let me state that there are definitely some groups of people who will enjoy this game, and that the hype isn't just because of the honeymoon phase. People who are satisfied with pretty visuals as the main reward for exploration, people who like beating bosses with overpowered builds, and people who like to perfect boss mechanics through many hours of trial and error will all enjoy Elden Ring DLC. Also, the music was quite amazing, it was better than the base game, and some of From's best. However, all of these positives were not enough for me to feel the FromSoft magic. I remember when Joseph Anderson said at the end of his Elden Ring critique that Elden Ring made him lose interest in From's future Souls-like titles that are played in the style of Dark Souls. At first I thought Joe was taking it a bit too far, but now I'm in the same boat as him. I do not have any interest in another dodge-hit FromSoft game that is hard for the sake of being hard without introducing new mechanics, and I might start to skip learning boss mechanics with summons and OP builds if this keeps up, and only play the games for exploration.
It sounds like this dude has just lost interest in Souls games. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like he's had enough Souls and he's ready for other stuff. I love Souls games. I don't think I'll ever get enough Souls games.
If they make a game that is hard because it introduces new mechanics like in Sekiro, I'll be interested in learning it. But
I mean, I'll tap on this in a little bit, but I personally do think they're cooking one more DLC for us. I think they are cooking a DLC going to be referred to the Gate of Divinity, and I think it's going to be based on we get over that gate into one more DLC. I think they're going to do one more for this game. I know people are saying they're done with it. I still say they're going to do one more.
Had enough of this game design approach. I would not recommend this DLC to any of my friends as entertainment, but I could recommend it as a dare. I dare you to try to put up with these overly aggressive, overtuned, hard-to-learn bosses. I dare you to try to do it without summons. The game is more fun to watch someone suffer through on Twitch than it is to be played.
Okay, so everybody is entitled to their own opinion. You know, at the end of the day, everybody is entitled. But I think this guy is just tired of Souls games. I think honestly, this dude has just kind of had enough Souls games, and he's lost that interest. He's lost the interest to want to explore. He's lost the interest to the lore. I am not one of those people. They can totally do another DLC, and it can be similar to Shadow of the Erdtree, and I'll still freaking enjoy it just because I wasn't satisfied with the ending of Shadow of the Erdtree. I wanted more. I need to know how this story plays out. There's so much lore that we don't know. There's the Glowmide Queen. You know, there's so much stuff in Godwyn. There's a backstory, you know, more of Godwyn stuff. They could tie in so much more, and I think we'll do one more DLC. I really truly think they're cooking. I think they are cooking in the background, and they're not telling anybody. And I think they have one more thing planned for Elden Ring before they leave it, because there's just such a world here that FromSoft and George R.R. Martin helped, you know, make that just is a fantastic masterpiece. That's just, I don't know. This review, I mean, like I said, you're entitled to your own opinion, but I loved this DLC, and this DLC was a true masterpiece, and I hope that they do one more DLC before moving on. But hope you guys enjoyed this critique. If you did, give it a like. Comment down below what your thoughts are on this review and also my point of views on his review. Let me know, because I'm very curious to see. It's interesting to see other people's opinions on this game, because I think it's fantastic and I just want more of it. So thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you guys next time. Stay strong and God bless.